Warning was ignored. Humans pursue them without mercy. The stars stretched endlessly across the dark expanse of space. Eli Turner stood at the observation deck of the Endurance, his hands pressed against the cold glass. The ship's engines hummed gently in the background, and outside the darkness was filled with distant, flickering lights from countless stars. He watched the stars but didn't really see them. His mind was elsewhere, focused on the mission ahead. Eli had been captain of the Endurance for over 5 years. He had led countless missions, but this one felt different. They were heading into uncharted space, a place where no human had dared venture before. The warning had come just days before they left. A message from the command station warned them about the Zorvax, a dangerous alien race known for their brutal, merciless tactics. The message was simple: avoid the Zorvax at all costs. They were an unpredictable, hostile species, and any encounter with them would likely end in disaster. But Eli didn't like being told what to do. He never had. He had learned early on in his career that to be a good leader, sometimes you had to make your own decisions, even if they went against orders. And right now, the decision was clear in his mind. He wasn't going to turn back. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft voice behind him. "Captain, the crew is ready for the briefing," Olivia Brooks said as she stepped into the room. She was the communications officer, sharp and practical, and always there to remind Eli when it was time to focus on the mission. Eli turned around and nodded. "Thanks, Olivia. Let's get to it." They walked to the command center where the rest of the crew was waiting. The room was large and filled with displays and control panels. Eli took his seat at the front of the room while the crew gathered around the table. Among them were Dr. Peter Hayes, the ship's scientist, and a handful of engineers and navigators, all ready for whatever lay ahead. They were a tight-knit group, bound by the belief that humanity's survival and advancement lay in the stars. But today, Eli could sense a quiet unease among them. The warning about the Zorvax weighed on everyone's minds. Eli cleared his throat. "I know what you're all thinking. We've been warned about the Zorvax, but I'm not turning back. We've got a mission to complete, and I'm not going to let some alien race scare us off." Olivia, standing next to him, glanced at the others. She could see their uncertainty. "Captain, I understand your drive, but these aliens are dangerous. The Zorvax don't just kill, they destroy everything. We don't know what we're walking into. We need to be cautious." Eli nodded, but his resolve was firm. "I've been in situations like this before. We've made it through worse. We're here to collect data, gather intelligence, and if the Zorvax are as dangerous as they say, we'll make sure to handle it. But I'm not going to run away from them." A silence filled the room. Dr. Hayes, the ship's scientist, spoke up. "You're right, Captain. There's a lot we don't know about the Zorvax, but there's also a lot we could learn. Imagine what we could gain from studying their technology. It could push humanity forward by centuries. This is a chance we can't afford to miss." Eli turned to him. "I'm not saying we don't explore, but we do it on our terms, not theirs. We'll make contact, learn what we can, and then we'll leave. If things get dangerous, we can always turn back. But I'm not going to let the fear of the unknown stop us from doing our job." Olivia's eyes narrowed. She wasn't sure she agreed with Eli, but she knew it was no use arguing. Once Eli made up his mind, there was no changing it. "Understood, Captain. We'll follow your lead." The meeting ended, and the crew returned to their stations. Olivia stayed behind, looking over the navigation charts. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were making a mistake, but there was nothing more she could do now. The decision had been made, and all they could do was prepare for what was coming. As the Endurance moved deeper into the uncharted sector of space, the crew grew more tense. The hum of the ship seemed to grow louder, as if it could sense the danger ahead. Eli spent most of his time in the command center, staring at the star maps and communicating with the fleet. Olivia spent her time working on the ship's communication systems, trying to ensure they could send and receive messages from the fleet in case of an emergency. The further they traveled, the more the crew began to feel the weight of their mission. Every small sound seemed amplified in the quiet of space. Every flicker of the lights seemed to signal something dangerous lurking in the dark. It wasn't long before they detected the first signs of the Zorvac fleet. The ship's sensors picked up strange energy readings ahead, something that didn't belong. They were getting closer. "Captain, we've got something," Olivia's voice crackled through the intercom. "We're picking up strange signals. It's them, the Zorvacs." Eli stood up, his heart racing. He had expected it, but now that the moment had come, the reality hit him hard. "Prepare the crew, we're going in." The ship's engines roared to life as the Endurance surged forward, cutting through the dark void of space. The crew was on edge, waiting for any sign of the Zorvax. They knew this could be the moment that would decide their fate. As they approached the source of the energy readings, something unexpected happened. The ship's systems began to fail. The lights flickered and the control panels flashed with warnings. The ship lurched forward, and for a moment everything went dark. "What's happening?" Eli shouted, gripping the armrest of his chair. Olivia worked frantically at her console, trying to restore power. "I don't know, Captain. It's like we've hit an electromagnetic field. It's jamming our systems." Dr. Hayes' voice came over the intercom. "This is it. We're too close to them. The Zorvax are using some sort of weapon to disable our ship." Eli gritted his teeth. He had hoped to avoid a confrontation like this, but now they had no choice. They were in the heart of enemy territory, and it was up to him to keep the crew alive. "Hold on, everyone. We're not going down that easily." The Endurance shuddered again, this time more violently. Eli could hear the muffled sounds of the crew scrambling to secure themselves. He knew they were in trouble, but there was no turning back. They had come this far, and he wasn't about to let the Zorvax get the better of them. The ship's systems flickered back to life, but the damage had been done. The crew was now on their own, facing an enemy they had only heard about in warnings and rumors. And as the Endurance continued its journey toward the unknown, one thing was clear. The warning had been ignored, and now they were in the Zorvax territory. The hunt had begun. The Endurance drifted through the dark void of space, its engines sputtering. The ship's lights flickered, casting long shadows over the faces of the crew. For a moment, everything felt like it was suspended in time. The crew members were all tense, each one unsure of what would happen next. They were in uncharted space, their mission was already in danger, and the Zorvax were somewhere nearby. Eli Turner stood in the command center, staring at the blinking control panels. The ship's power was slowly coming back, but they were still in the grip of whatever had caused the sudden shutdown. The strange energy pulses that had knocked out their systems were still there, only now they were stronger than before. They were closer than Eli had expected. "We need to move fast," Eli muttered to himself as his hands worked quickly to reroute power to the ship's weapons. But the display in front of him only showed more warnings. The Zorvax influence was everywhere. Eli knew it would only get worse from here. Behind him, Olivia Brooks, the communications officer, was working hard to restore their long-range communication systems. Her fingers flew over the controls, but it was no use. Whatever was interfering with their systems seemed to be blocking everything. They were cut off from the rest of the fleet. "This isn't good, Captain," Olivia said, her voice low. "We can't contact anyone. It's like we've entered a blackout zone." Eli took a deep breath and turned to face her. He saw the concern in her eyes, but he couldn't afford to dwell on it. "We don't have time to worry about that. The Zorvax are close, and we need to be ready." Olivia nodded, but Eli could tell she wasn't convinced. She had been with him on many missions, but this was different. The Zorvax weren't like any other enemy they had faced. They were a terrifying, unknown force, and everyone on the crew felt the weight of that knowledge. The silence in the room was broken by the voice of Dr. Peter Hayes, the ship's scientist, who had been busy analyzing the strange energy readings. "Captain, you need to see this," he said, his voice urgent. Eli walked over to the console where Dr. Hayes was working. The scientist was staring at a screen filled with strange symbols and data. "What is it, Peter?" Eli asked. "This isn't just interference. The Zorvax are creating a field around us, a field that's distorting our sensors," Dr. Hayes explained. "It's like they're cloaking themselves." Eli frowned. He had known the Zorvax were dangerous, but this was beyond what he had prepared for. "So, what can we do?" Dr. Hayes looked up, his eyes wide with fear. "We can't track them. We're flying blind. And worse, if we don't get out of this field soon, they'll be able to trap us." Eli stood still for a moment, thinking. He could feel the pressure mounting. He had ignored the warning, and now they were in a deadly game of cat and mouse with an enemy that could strike at any moment. Olivia's voice broke through his thoughts. "Captain, we have another problem." Eli turned to see her pointing at a blinking red light on her console. "What is it?" "We're not alone. There's something else out there," Olivia said, her voice tight with fear. Eli moved quickly to her side and looked at the screen. In the distance, barely visible, a shape appeared on the sensor grid. It was large, too large to be just a ship. The dark silhouette loomed in the distance, almost as if it was waiting for them. "They're here," Eli said under his breath. "Prepare for a possible attack." The crew sprang into action. Engineers scrambled to power up the ship's defenses, while Olivia worked to open communication channels, even though she knew it was unlikely the Zorvax would respond. Dr. Hayes was already at his console, trying to gather more data on the alien ship. "We need to move," Eli said, his voice filled with urgency. He could hear the low hum of the ship's engines, but it wasn't enough. They were too vulnerable out here. Olivia's face turned pale. "Captain, they've locked onto us. They know we're here." Eli's heart pounded in his chest. The Zorvax had found them, and they weren't wasting any time. "Initiate evasive maneuvers," he ordered. The Endurance lurched as the crew scrambled to keep the ship steady. The ship shuddered under the strain of the evasive moves, but it was no use. The Zorvax were already firing at them. The first blast hit the Endurance with a deafening crash. Sparks flew from the control panels, and the ship's hull groaned under the force of the attack. Eli's knuckles turned white as he gripped the armrest of his seat. He could feel the ship's vibrations in his bones, and he knew they were in serious trouble. "We've taken damage," one of the engineers shouted from the back of the room. "Hull integrity is holding, but we need to get out of here." Eli looked up at the display. The Zorvax ship was moving closer, firing blast after blast at them. He had to make a choice: fight back or run. The Endurance wasn't equipped for a direct battle with a Zorvax ship, and their weapons were weak compared to the aliens' advanced technology. But Eli wasn't one to back down. He wasn't going to run, not when they had come this far. "Prepare the weapons," he barked. "We'll make a stand here, keep evasive maneuvers going, but fire at will. We won't give up without a fight." The crew reacted quickly, their training kicking in as they manned the weapons systems. The Endurance fired back, but the Zorvax ship easily absorbed the shots. Eli watched in frustration. The enemy was too powerful. "Captain," Olivia said urgently, "we can't keep this up. We need to get out of here now." But it was already too late. The Zorvax fired another blast, this one larger than the others. It slammed into the Endurance's side, knocking the ship off course. Warning lights flashed all over the command center, and the ship's power began to fluctuate again. Eli's hands were shaking as he worked frantically to stabilize the ship. "Damage report," he shouted. "We've lost several engines," one of the engineers called back. "We're drifting. The Zorvax are closing in." Eli cursed under his breath. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The Endurance was supposed to be the pride of the fleet, but now it was just a sitting target. "Get us out of here, Olivia," he yelled. Olivia worked furiously, trying to get the ship's engines back online. The Zorvax ship was getting closer, and they were running out of time. Eli's heart was racing, and he could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. If they didn't make it out of here soon, they would all be dead. Then a voice came over the intercom. "Captain," Dr. Hayes said, his voice calmer than the rest of them. "I think I found something. The Zorvax have a weak point in their shields. We can exploit it." Eli's eyes widened. This was their chance. "Tell me what to do, Peter." "Fire at their aft engines. Aim for the weak spot. It's the only way we can break through their shields and escape." Eli nodded, his hands steady despite the chaos around him. This was it. He would lead them to survival or to their doom. He gave the order to fire, and the Endurance shot another round toward the Zorvax ship. This time it hit. The Zorvax ship's engines flared, and the massive vessel lurched. The shields around the ship began to flicker, and for a brief moment the crew of the Endurance saw their chance. "We've got a breach," Olivia shouted. "Take the shot." Eli took a deep breath. He had made his choice. He would see this mission through, no matter the cost. The Endurance fired again, hitting the Zorvax ship with everything it had. The enemy ship staggered, and for a brief moment there was hope. The Endurance was still alive, and so was the crew, but the battle wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. The Endurance was shaking as it drifted through the blackness of space. The crew was exhausted, but there was no time to rest. They had just managed to break through the Zorvax ship's shields, but they were far from safe. The Zorvax had already begun repairing their ship, and Eli Turner knew they were not out of danger yet. Eli stood in the command center, his eyes scanning the monitors. He could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on him. The Endurance was barely holding together after the battle. They had taken serious damage, and the crew was running low on supplies. They were stranded in enemy space, cut off from the rest of the fleet. If they couldn't find a way to escape, they were done for. "Captain," Olivia Brooks said, her voice tense. "The Zorvacs are repairing their ship faster than we can damage it. They've got a lot more firepower than we thought." Eli clenched his fists, frustration bubbling inside him. "I know, Olivia, we don't have much time." Doctor. Peter Hayes, the ship's scientist, was sitting at a console, his eyes glued to the data. "There's something strange going on with their technology. They're using a form of energy that we've never seen before. If we can figure it out, we might have a chance." Eli turned to him, his face hard. "How much time do we have, Peter?" Peter looked up, his face pale. "At this rate, they'll be back up to full strength in a few hours. We don't have long." The tension in the room was palpable. Eli knew the crew was depending on him. He was their captain, their leader, and they were all looking to him for answers. But deep down, he wasn't sure how much longer they could hold on. "We need to make a plan," Eli said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "We can't keep fighting like this." "We need to figure out how to escape," Olivia nodded. "The Zorvacs are fast. We won't be able to outrun them in this condition, but if we can disable their engines, we might have a shot." Eli's mind was already racing. "How do we disable their engines?" Peter looked thoughtful. "If we can get close enough, I think we can trigger a system malfunction. The problem is getting close without them noticing. They'll be looking for us now." Eli knew Peter was right. The Zorvacs wouldn't give up easily, but they didn't have much of a choice. If they stayed here, they would be destroyed. He turned to Olivia. "Prepare the ship for a stealth approach. We need to get as close as possible without being detected." Olivia didn't hesitate. "Understood, Captain." The crew went to work, moving quickly to get the ship into position. They had to be careful. One wrong move, and the Zorvacs would spot them before they could make a move. The ship's systems were still damaged, but they managed to get enough power to keep the Endurance moving silently through space. The Zorvac ship was ahead of them, its massive size dwarfing the Endurance. It loomed in the distance, like a dark shadow waiting to strike. Eli's heart raced as they drew closer. He could see the Zorvac ship's lights flickering, the energy shields slowly coming back online. They were running out of time. "We're in position," Olivia called out from her station. "We can't get any closer without being noticed." Eli took a deep breath. This was it. "Fire everything we've got at their engines. We don't have a second chance." The Endurance fired its weapons, the energy blasts cutting through the emptiness of space. The Zorvac ship shook as it took the hit, but it didn't stop moving. They had managed to damage their engines, but not enough to stop them completely. "We need to hit them again," Eli shouted. "We can't give them a chance to recover." Olivia worked quickly, reloading the weapons and firing again. The ship shuddered with each blast, but the Zorvacs weren't going down without a fight. Their ship turned to face the Endurance, and Eli knew they were about to be in the fight of their lives. The Zorvac ship fired back, its weapons lighting up the darkness. The Endurance rocked with the force of the blast, and Eli could hear the crew shouting over the comms as they tried to stabilize the ship. "We've lost more power," one of the engineers yelled. "We're not going to make it if we don't stop them," Olivia shouted. Eli felt his heart race. They couldn't keep up this fight forever. They had to finish it now. He turned to Peter. "Do you have anything that can get us past their defenses?" Peter's eyes widened. "Maybe. There's one thing I can try. It's risky, but it might work." Eli didn't have time for hesitation. "Do it." Peter moved quickly to his console, his fingers flying over the keys. "I'm accessing their power grid. If I can overload their systems, it might disable their shields long enough for us to get in close." Eli watched as Peter worked, his breath coming in quick bursts. The Zorvacs were closing in, their weapons charging up for another attack. They had no more time to waste. Peter looked up, his face tight with concentration. "I've got it. This is it." Eli gave the order. "Fire now." The Endurance fired one final shot, a concentrated blast aimed directly at the Zorvac ship's power core. The blast hit its mark, and for a moment everything was still. Then the Zorvac ship exploded. The shockwave rocked the Endurance, sending it tumbling through space. Eli gripped the console as the ship spun out of control. The explosion had been massive, far bigger than anything they had anticipated. The Zorvac ship was gone, reduced to debris floating in the blackness of space. For a moment there was silence. The crew was stunned, not sure if they had one or if it was just a temporary reprieve. Olivia was the first to speak. "Did we do it?" Eli checked the sensors. The Zorvac ship's signature was gone, and there was no sign of their fleet. For now, they were safe. But Eli knew better than to think it was over. The Zorvax wouldn't give up that easily. This battle had only bought them time. "We're not out of danger yet," Eli said, his voice grim. "But we've won this round." The crew let out a collective breath. It wasn't much, but it was enough. For now. But as they drifted in the silence of space, Eli couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The Zorvax were relentless, and he had no doubt they would come after them again. The Endurance had won the battle, but the war was far from over. And so, the crew prepared to move forward, knowing they had only survived by the skin of their teeth. Whatever came next, they would face it together. But Eli couldn't help but wonder how much longer their luck would hold. The Endurance drifted quietly through space, its hull battered and scarred from the recent battle. Eli Turner stood in the command center, staring at the flickering screens. His mind was a mix of relief and anxiety. They had managed to defeat the Zorvax ship, but Eli knew they were not truly safe. The Zorvax would not forget what had happened. They would come back. And next time they would be more prepared. Olivia Brooks sat at her station, her eyes focused on the communication channels. There was still no sign of the rest of the fleet. They were alone, isolated in deep space. The Endurance had taken serious damage, and their chances of survival were growing slimmer by the minute. But despite the situation, Olivia was calm, her hands steady as she worked. "We're in the clear for now," she said, breaking the silence. "But I don't think it will last." "The Zorvax are probably regrouping." Eli nodded. "I know. We can't sit here forever. We need to figure out a way to get back to the fleet." Peter Hayes, the ship's scientist, had been working quietly at his console. His eyes were glued to the readings on the screen, his mind racing with thoughts of the Zorvax technology. "Captain, I've been analyzing the data from the Zorvax ship. There's something strange going on. I think they've been using some kind of advanced cloaking system. We may not have seen the last of them." Eli turned to Peter, his mind whirring. "So they can hide from us?" Peter nodded. "Exactly. Their technology is far more advanced than ours. We won't be able to detect them if they use that cloaking system again." Eli clenched his fists. He had hoped for a brief respite after the battle, but now he knew that the true fight was just beginning. The Zorvax were more dangerous than he had imagined, and he was starting to feel the weight of their relentless pursuit. "Do we have any way of countering it?" Eli asked. Peter hesitated. "Not yet, but there's a chance. If we can get close enough to one of their ships, we might be able to disable their cloaking system." Eli looked around at his crew. They were exhausted, physically and mentally drained from the fight. He knew they needed rest, but there was no time for that. They had to keep moving. The Zorvax were out there, and they wouldn't stop until they had found them. "We don't have much time," Eli said, his voice firm. "We need to find a way to get back to the fleet. But we also need to be ready for the Zorvax when they come for us." Olivia looked up from her console. "Captain, we've been picking up strange energy signals. They're coming from a nearby asteroid field. It might be another ship. Maybe the fleet's hiding there." Eli's eyes narrowed. "Another ship, or the Zorvax?" Olivia didn't answer right away, but her fingers moved quickly over the controls. "I'm not sure. The signals are too weak to be certain, but they're definitely not Zorvax in origin." "That's where we're going then," Eli said, standing up. "Prepare the ship for a course change. If it's the fleet, we might have a chance. If it's not, we'll deal with it." The crew worked quickly to change the course of the Endurance. The ship was still sluggish from the damage it had taken, but they were moving again. Every moment felt like a race against time. The asteroid field loomed ahead, a dark, swirling mass of rock and debris. The unknown signals led them right into the heart of it. As they entered the asteroid field, the crew fell silent. The feeling of being watched, of being hunted, was heavy in the air. They knew they were not alone out here, and the longer they waited, the more the pressure mounted. "Captain," Olivia said quietly, "I'm picking up more energy signatures. They're coming from inside the asteroid field, something S out there." Eli's stomach tightened. "Are they hostile?" "I'm not sure," Olivia replied, "but we're too close to back out now. We need to move forward." The Endurance cut through the asteroid field, the rocks swirling around them as they navigated carefully. The ship's engines hummed, the only sound in the tense silence. The crew was on edge, waiting for the first sign of danger. Then, without warning, the ship's sensors blared an alarm. "Captain, we're being targeted," Olivia shouted, her voice filled with alarm. "Evasive maneuvers," Eli ordered, his heart racing. The Endurance jerked to the side, narrowly avoiding a blast that struck one of the asteroids nearby. The force of the impact sent debris flying, and the Endurance rocked violently. "We've got incoming," one of the engineers called out. "They're coming in fast." Eli's hands gripped the controls tightly as he ordered more evasive maneuvers. The asteroid field was becoming a deadly maze, with incoming blasts and flying debris everywhere. The Zorvacs were here, and they were not going to let them escape. "Hold steady," Eli shouted to the crew. "Get us into cover." The Endurance swerved behind a large asteroid, using it as a shield from the Zorvacs' attacks. The ship systems were working at their limit, but it wasn't enough to keep them safe for long. The Zorvacs' weapons were too powerful. Every time they fired, the Endurance shook, sending vibrations through the entire ship. Olivia's voice came over the comms. "Captain, I think they've locked onto us. They're preparing to fire again." Eli's mind raced. They couldn't keep dodging like this forever. They needed a way to fight back, but their weapons were too weak compared to the Zorvacs' firepower. Peter's voice broke through the chaos. "Captain, I've got an idea. If we can get close enough to one of the Zorvac ships, I can overload their shields. It's risky, but it might work." Eli nodded. "Do it. We don't have a choice." The crew worked quickly, adjusting the ship's course to get within range of the nearest Zorvac ship. The Zorvacs had closed in, their ships moving with frightening speed through the asteroid field. The Endurance was barely keeping up, its damaged engines struggling to keep pace. "We're almost there," Olivia shouted. "Get ready." The Zorvac ship fired again, the blast sending the Endurance into a spin. The ship's hull groaned under the strain, and Eli could hear the sounds of alarms blaring all around him. "Now, Peter," Eli yelled. Peter worked quickly, his fingers flying over the console. "I'm initiating the overload now." The Endurance fired a final shot at the Zorvac ship, hitting its shield with everything they had. The Zorvac ship shuddered, and for a moment everything went silent. Then the explosion came. The Zorvac ship erupted in a flash of light, its shields failing under the pressure of the blast. The Endurance was thrown backward from the force of the explosion, but they were alive. "We did it!" Olivia cried, her voice full of relief. Eli exhaled, his heart still pounding in his chest. They had done it. The Zorvac's ship was destroyed, and for now they were safe. But Eli knew this wasn't over. The Zorvacs would come for them again. They always did. And when they did, the Endurance would be ready. For now, though they had won, they had survived another battle, and in space, survival was everything.